I've literally reviewed and read and examined over 1,000 pieces of literature on health and longevity, and no matter who writes it, or whether it's from Russia or Europe or the United States, or the veterinary literature on the subject of health and longevity, there's two basic themes that come out, and I call them concept number one, concept number two. That's what we're going to cover now. Concept number one for health and longevity is, I call it how to avoid stepping on the landmines. It's very simple, things you don't want to do. That way you can survive long enough for the other thing to kick in, concept number two to kick in. Concept number one, you don't want to smoke, you don't want to abuse alcohol, you don't want to do drugs, you don't want to jog down the highway at 2 o'clock in the morning wearing an all-black ninja suit. You're going to get hit by a car, right? There's nothing greater than a mirror from a truck. Then you don't want to jump out of a hot air balloon from 250 foot up with a 300-foot bungee cord on. As crazy as that sounds, millions of Americans throw away their healthy physical bodies every year doing all these stupid things. So I take just a few seconds to remind you of that. Lastly, in concept number one, if at all possible, you want to avoid going to a doctor because given half a chance, a doctor will kill you. Now, to some of you, that may seem a little flippant, right? So, gosh, this guy's really weird. And so I'm going to back that up with a little bit of a statistic here so that you know that I'm coming from the area of truth. January of 1973, Ralph Nader came out with the results of a 3-year study on deaths in American hospitals, and it was very shocking what he came up with. He said, and this is a quote from his study, quote, 300,000 Americans are killed each year in hospitals alone as a result of medical negligence, unquote. 300,000. Now, that's each year. Now, just to have a comparison, to understand how big a figure that is, let's compare that figure, 300,000 a year, with that's killed by the medical profession. He used the word killed. Let's compare it with 10 years of military losses in Vietnam, where we had 56,000 killed over 10 years by enemies that had artillery and explosives and bayonets and rifles trying to kill you. And that averaged out 5,600 a year. And for that, we had millions of people protest. They poured out into the streets. We had political anarchy the last 3 years of that 10-year war. We chased the president out of the presidency. We actually shot students in Kent State, Ohio, demonstrating against the war for 5,600 military personnel a year. Now, according to Ralph Nader, here's one profession who takes your tax money in the form of Medicare and Medicaid, turns around and kills 300,000 of you a year, and you can't even find a crazy street preacher out here in any corner protesting it. All you find are people lined up at these electronic town hall meetings saying, Hillary, Hillary, we got to have more of that stuff free. Find a way to tax me so I can get it free. And I'm from Missouri, so I haven't figured out how that works yet. Now, one of the things you've seen recently is advertisements in newspapers. This actually comes from a full-page ad in the New York Times on HMOs and doctors' clinics, and they put their faces and pictures in there. And 10 years ago, if they would have done this, the state medical board would have taken away their licenses for unethical practices. They used to say 5 years ago, even, after all, it was only quacks and chiropractors that would advertise in newspapers and phone books. But now the doctors are just, the medical doctors are just shoving everybody out of the way to do this. And what they're trying to say is that if you join our HMO and give us this monthly fee, we'll give you a whole team of doctors for the price of one. I mean, you're going to get everything. Doesn't matter if you need a head amputated or a wart taken off your toe. You get a whole team for the price of one. Actually, this means that you have a 500% increase in risk of being damaged. Now, just about 1 year ago, Ralph Nader came out with another survey. This happened to be in the front page of every newspaper in the land. And of course, because this happened in July of 1994, this is the time of the baseball strike, and people were jumping right to the sports page and missing this, so I saved it for you. This happens to be from the front page of the USA Today, and Ralph Nader said 1 year ago, 70% of the medical doctors who treat Medicare patients in America flunked the exam on how to prescribe to them safely and effectively. 70%. Now, what would happen to American Airlines if 70% of the pilots flunked the exam on how to fly? What would happen to American Airlines if they killed 300,000 passengers a year? And why is there this difference between our acceptance of what an airline does and what the medical profession does? Here's an example of what Ralph Nader was talking about. He said 32,000 hip fractures each year are attributed to prescribing by medical doctors that leaves the elderly unbalanced and dizzy. They try to avoid stepping on the grandkid, and they fall and break a hip, or they might get out of the bathtub or step out of a car, and they break a hip or slide down the stairs. And this is a death sentence for 29,000 of them. Remember, 75% of the people over age 65 fracture a hip or major leg bone don't live 90 days. And I believe the only way to stop this is to make physicians responsible for this the same way that we make bartenders responsible when they give people too many drinks and let them drive home and they kill somebody else or themselves. And, we put about 500 to 1,000 doctors in jail for life without parole. They'll start paying attention to decimal points on the outside. Now, here's a quick look at the medications that should not be given to people over the age of 65 if they're up walking around. This is from Ralph Nader in the PDR, the Physician's Desk reference. And of course, 70% of American doctors do prescribe these things on a regular basis to people over age 65. We're looking at high blood pressure medications, blood thinners, pain relievers, diabetic medications, arthritis medications, tranquilizers, sleeping pills, and this is the basis of the problem. Now, who is it that they kill? Is it just the homeless? You know, medical students go out in the dark of the night in their VW van and collect the homeless and take them into the basements of the medical centers and hospitals and practice on them? No, it doesn't matter if you're homeless or you live in a big house. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or if you're an embryo or a toddler or a teenager, middle-aged or a senior. It doesn't matter if you're educated or uneducated. If you go to a hospital, you're at risk. Now, here's a quick example. This little gal here, Betsy Lehman. How many of you remember her story? It was just a couple of months ago, April, half a dozen. It's amazing. Betsy Lehman, 39 years old, was getting treated for breast cancer at age 39, and she was getting the last of a series of chemotherapy treatments over a period of 5 months. And she was the top medical reporter for the Boston Globe, which is the second largest newspaper in the United States. And she examined the records of all these cancer treatment centers and chose the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston because to her it was the best in the world. And on their last treatment, they gave her a 4-day dose every day for 4 days. They gave her a 16 times overdose and killed this 39-year-old woman with an overdose of chemotherapy, even though she was the top medical reporter for the Boston Globe. And here's one that'll even ring your bell even a little more. Jackie Kennedy. This picture was taken of her, and I lifted it out of a magazine because I think it's significant. This picture was taken of her 3 days before she entered the hospital for chemotherapy for the first treatment for cancer. She doesn't look like a terminal cancer patient. She was taking a stroll around Central Park on a brisk day with a friend, and she was diagnosed 6 months before her death with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer that normally takes 10, 12, 15 years to kill you. It's relatively painless, and Jackie had 15 years left when she was diagnosed. There was no death watch on her when she entered the hospital for her chemotherapy, her first treatment. There was no reporter standing out there and giving you 15-minute updates. She kind of waved to the press, hey, I'm going in for some chemotherapy, no big deal, and nobody made a big hoo-ha out of it. Tuesday, she was dead. 4 days later, she was dead, and you were supposed to believe that Jackie Kennedy died of cancer. Well, I'm a pathologist as well as a clinician, and I can guarantee you, as sure as God made little green apples, Jackie Kennedy did not die of cancer. She was killed with an overdose of chemotherapy, just like Betsy Lehman. Same. Now, if they can kill the top medical reporter from the Boston Globe, they can kill Jackie Kennedy, and not a single doctor was suspended. They didn't fine the hospital. Nobody was sued. What chance do each and every one of you have? None, none, and none. Okay? None, none, and none. Now, this goes on, according to Ralph Nader, because simply of greed. Doctors don't want to start a landslide of having problems, and so they just kind of ignore all these things. And this happened to be from the Washington Post editorial page, November 2nd, 1992, and the headline said, lining docs' pockets. If you go to your doctor, you want him to think of you as a patient, not a cash cow. You farmers know what a cash cow is, right? That's where you milk them, and you don't drink the milk, you sell it to pay your bills. But 2 studies in this month's New England Journal of Medicine, the top medical journal in America, shows that doctors are out to milk you dry. Then 10 months later, in one of my favorite little magazines, Reader's Digest, there's a great little article, and to me the Reader's Digest is the sweetest little magazine that ever was. Never says anything negative about any individual or group. I mean, it's so neutral. You find it in the waiting rooms of politicians and lawyers and doctors. I mean, it doesn't offend anybody. But in this issue, September 1993, on page 77, it says, can you trust your doctor? And it lists 12 ways that doctors routinely scam money from patients and insurance. I'll just give you the worst one. You can go look up the other 11. According to Reader's Digest, not Joel Wallach, doctors in America get $421 in kickbacks every time they send you in for a CAT scan or an MRI. You say, Doc really cares about me. He sent me in for an MRI. I just had this shoulder pain. Cha-ching. Now, according to Reader's Digest, not Joel Wallach, the average doctor in America each year gets $226,681 in CAT scan and MRI kickbacks. That's almost $250,000. And you wonder why insurance keeps going up and you can't afford medical care. Now, one of my favorite surveys from Harvard Medical School was put out in 1972. And what they did was look at the use of illegal drugs by medical doctors, and they looked at the illegal use of prescription drugs by medical doctors, and what they found out was pretty terrifying. What they found out in 1972 was that 52% of all licensed medical doctors in America use psychotropic drugs illegally every week. 52% every week. You're looking at speed, cocaine, marijuana, opium derivatives, and other drugs like fentanyl, anesthetics, and so forth. And so next time you go to a doctor, if you still choose to go after tonight, don't be too excited about the degrees he has hanging on the wall. You want to look at the pupils of his eyes and see if he's gorked out before you let him diagnose you. Or do surgery on you. Then even scarier yet, 78% of the medical students use psychotropic drugs illegally every week. 78%. And here's an example. This fellow here was a pediatrician. His obituary appeared in the front page of the Union Tribune in San Diego, December of 1994. And he was a 30-year-old pediatrician, took care of babies, right? And he died of a self-inflicted overdose of these recreational drugs. And said, eulogized him, said, he saved the lives of children but lost his own. And in the article it said, he devoted his whole life to caring for children. Well, he must have been a babysitter most of his life because he was only out of school, medical school, for 3 years. He was 30 years old. And he was a thief because the drugs he killed himself with, he stole from the hospital pharmacy. And he was malignant dumb, because after 14 years of medical school, he still couldn't read a syringe properly, and he overdosed himself. I mean, even these high school dropouts that live in cardboard boxes don't kill themselves with drugs, right? They just go on and on and on like these pink rabbits. At any rate, God works in mysterious ways and took him out of the loop for us. I mean, you wouldn't want him taking care of your kids or grandkids, would you? His nickname in medical school was the social director, because he was the one who could always get the drugs and alcohol for the medical students. Now, you can always learn a lot from obituaries. That's another one of my hobbies, is collecting obituaries. And, you know, you can learn what's going on in a community, how good the doctors are by reading obituaries in the community. And so this one fascinated me. Grace Mastera, 48 years old, died of breast cancer. Not unusual, tragically, but certainly a waste of humanity. But this little tale on the headline, given radiation as a baby, concerned me. So I read her obituary in detail, then took that information and went to the medical school and dug out some facts. And basically, when she was 6 months old, her pediatrician shrunk her thymus gland with radiation, high doses of radiation, because he felt it was too big. He didn't have any yardstick to determine whether it was too big or too small. He just felt it was too big. Large thymus gland just means you have a robust immune system. You want a large thymus gland. It begins to shrink the day you're born. You don't want a small one. And between 1945 and 1950, every doctor in America could get his own little x-ray machine as an Army surplus or military surplus for about 25 bucks. No instructions, no restrictions, no handbook. They just said, here, doc, here's your x-ray machine. Go x-ray them. And according to the Department of Energy, between 1945 and 1950, 1 million American babies had their thymus glands shrunk with radiation by pediatricians. 1 million American babies. Now, again, according to the Department of Energy, each and every one of these people have either already died of cancer or currently under treatment for cancer, or are projected to get cancer because of the radiation they got in their chest to shrink their thymus glands. I want you to remember that not a single foreign enemy has ever radiated an American, either military or civilian. And here's one profession let loose with x-ray machines, radiated 1 million healthy American babies. Trust me, my dear, I'm a doctor. Now, I wonder what the pupils looked like in the eyes of this surgeon that morning when this doctor took off the normal breast and left the cancerous one on this woman in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I guarantee you that no sober surgeon could do that. They have an x-ray hanging on the wall of the surgery room. They have a red wax pencil, you know, with a big arrow saying, that's the one, doc, you know. And if he's the sort of guy that's dyslexic, they put a red ribbon around his arm and say, take off that one. And so you know that this guy had to be gorked out on something. This one here was a neurosurgeon. He took the skull off his patient, began operating on the brain, and he had the munchies, according to the article, had to run out for 25 minutes and go eat something. I don't believe that's true, because I've done a lot of surgery, and even if you get hungry, you don't run out in the middle of an operation. I believe he was one of those 52% of the medical doctors who were on cocaine, and he was getting withdrawal symptoms and had to go snort something in the bathroom and recover before he went back. And he left the nurse with a Black & Decker drill drilling holes in this patient's head. And she injured the patient, so he got his license suspended for 30 days. I mean, he's a doctor. He spent 14 years in school. He deserves to get his money back, right? This one here is kind of interesting. Wonder what his what this surgeon's pupils look like. He was from the Osteopathic Medical Center of Texas, and he promptly removed the normal lung of a patient and left the cancerous one in. He settled for $9 million. Why didn't he go to court and fight it? Now, one of the basic things you'd like to see physicians learn in medical school is whether a patient is alive or dead. That should be basic training, right? You'd like to think so. But you never know when you see stuff like this in the newspaper. Now, this gal was 86 years old, and she was found cold, stiff, and blue in her nursing home apartment. And, of course, the doctor there came up and couldn't find her pulse on just a simple examination. He said, oh, look, she's 86 years old. Let's let her slip away quietly. Let's not do anything heroic here and run up the cost for the family. So they called the coroner's wagon. They hauled her body off to the hospital in the local area. And the house doctor's not going to let you put a body into the hospital morgue unless there's a death certificate. So he comes down, he examines her. He couldn't find the pulse. He's, okay, she's dead. Writes a death certificate. They strip her down, hose her body down, put her in a body bag, and put her in a freezer for 90 minutes until the coroner gets there to do an autopsy. They wheel her out after 90 minutes in the freezer, zip open the body bag. She sits up and says, oh, thank God you found me. It was cold and dark in there, and I didn't know where I was. Now, she had to be a tough old bird. You try hosing yourself down, get naked in a freezer for 90 minutes and see how well you do. Now, do you think those doctors really cared about her? Now, this guy was famous. Willie King at the University Community Hospital in Tampa, Florida. He had gangrene of his right leg. And he went into the hospital to get his right leg amputated because he had uncontrolled diabetes. And, of course, when you have gangrene, the meat stinks like rotten meat in the garbage. I mean, you can't miss it. The skin is slipping off and bones are showing through, and it's a real mess. And the surgeon promptly amputated his normal left leg. I mean, even a Cub Scout wouldn't do that. And so I know that he was gorked out on something. A couple more here, and we'll get into the concept number 2. I know that's why you're here. But I think you have to know this stuff, so you really pay attention to concept number 2. Medical student arrested for illegal sale of weapons. I don't believe that he made a habit of selling guns to street gangs like he was caught for. I believe he was one of the 78% of the medical students who were doing cocaine, and the street gangs blackmailed him and said, hey, if you don't buy us some guns, we'll tell people you're using cocaine and you'll never practice. So I'm glad he's out of the loop too. Another one of those very moral, high, ethical medical people. A couple more here. Insurers are now getting swamped with disability claims by doctors. These are doctors who have sold their practices to HMOs. Now, when they're in private practice, they gross $50,000 to $100,000 a month. And, of course, they get to play with the money. If they're a specialist like a cardiologist or orthopedic surgeon, they gross $250,000 or $500,000 a month. And what they do, of course, is if they want to buy a Mercedes, they don't pay interest on it for 10 years. They just take a late payment on their house, pay 10% for a late fee, and they plop down $100,000 on a Mercedes. And they get to play with that money. Now, once they sell their practice to an HMO, the HMO keeps all that money. Have to pay the nurses and the insurance and all the gloves, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And the doctor gets a paycheck, $10,000 a month. Now, to you and me, that sounds like a lot of money, but to an orthopedic surgeon, that's sticker shock. And he kind of says, oh, my God, what did I do here? And then he starts looking at the benefits. Why did I become an employee of this HMO? And he learns that his disability check is going to be $20,000 a month. And he figures, why should I practice and risk losing my house and my car from, a malpractice suit, work hard, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, do surgery, when all I have to do is, got a back problem here, and it's real easy to get a golf buddy to say he blew a disc, and suddenly now he can collect $20,000 a month. And that's what's happening now. These doctors are so used to stealing money from patients and insurance, there was no big mental leap for them to do that. Last one, concept number 1, why you need to take care of yourself and how to avoid the landmines, is this trust gap that's between doctors and patients. Everybody knows that doctors treat the symptoms rather than getting down to the root cause of things. That's no secret. And some of the greatest cartoons today about doctors, you see this little granny going into a doctor's office, and she's got law books and a PDR and a Merck manual, and she's got a big thug with her to beat up on the doctor and a lawyer and all this sort of stuff. And so you know that there's this trust gap, and doctors know this. And my daddy, when I grew up on the farm, he'd say things to me like, Joel, if you do anything in this community, if you make anybody in this community feel that we're liars or we're dishonest, I will personally burn you at the stake. Now, that made an impression on me when I was a kid, because I know what roasted marshmallows looked like, and I didn't want to be burned at the stake. And so, even on Halloween, I never dumped over outhouses. I was very careful. And I would like to see ethics professors in medical schools tell their medical students, look, if you do anything to a patient, if you cheat a patient, if you're dishonest with a patient, I will personally come to your practice and strangle you to death. I would like to see them say things like that, but they don't. Here's what's happening in medical schools. Doctors are now urging, or medical professors are now urging medical students to take acting lessons so they can convince patients they love them. Instead of getting down to the root cause of things and just being honest, they're learning how to act so they can convince you that they love you. Okay, that's concept number 1. Those are all the reasons why you want to take control of your own health. And I'm really genuinely so happy to see so many people here who are interested in information in their own health. Now, concept number 2, once you've survived long enough for concept number 2 to kick in, what you have to do is give your body all of the 90 essential nutrients every day that it needs to maintain and repair itself. We need 60 minerals, we need 16 vitamins, we need 12 essential amino acids, 3 essential fatty acids, and they're called essential nutrients because each and every one of them are required every day to prevent 1 or more diseases. On the average, about 10 diseases per nutrient. And there's 90 essential nutrients times 10 diseases. That's 900 diseases that you can prevent and theoretically reverse with nutrition. That, to me, is very spectacular. The second part of the definition of something that's essential is your body cannot make it. And so you must eat it every day. You must take it in every day. Now, the media knows you're interested in health and nutrition. That's why 90% of you are here, because you heard our interviews on the radio. And it doesn't matter whether it's radio or TV or newspapers or magazines. Everybody's talking about health, low cholesterol diets, low fat diets, high fiber diets, eat 5 pounds of broccoli a day, all that kind of stuff, right? Well, my favorite article of all time from the media, from the hard press anyway, what they call hard ink, is Time magazine, The Real Power of Vitamins. New research shows they may help fight heart disease, cancer, and the ravages of aging. The first time that the subject of vitamins and minerals and supplementation was, in fact, talked about in a positive way for the American people in a mainstream publication. Again, The Real Power of Vitamins, new research shows it may help fight cancer, heart disease, and the ravages of aging. There were 6 positive pages in that article, and if you haven't read it, I'd urge you to go to a public library, a school library, and get it. There was only 1 negative sentence that was given, as you might expect, by a medical doctor who was asked by the writer of the article, what do you think about vitamins and minerals as supplements for human nutrition? Here's what this medical doctor said, quote, popping vitamins doesn't do you any good, sniffs Dr. Victor Herbert, a professor of medicine at New York City's Mount Sinai Medical School. We get all the vitamins we need in our diets, and taking supplements just gives you expensive urine, unquote. Now, a Missouri translation of that is you're just peeing away your money if you take vitamins and minerals. You might as well take your dollars, throw them in the toilet, and flush them away, because you can get everything you need from your 4 food groups. That's what he was trying to say. I can tell you, after having done those 17,500 autopsies in over 454 species of animals, plus 3,000 human beings, practicing in a general family practice for 12 years up in Portland, Oregon, and pushing 60 myself and having kids this big and grandkids this big and not too distant future great-grandkids, I'd rather pee out 50 cents or $1 a day worth of excess vitamins and minerals, because it's a cheap insurance. It's a cheap investment in yourself to keep yourself healthy. And if you don't invest 50 cents to $1 a day in yourself, as sure as God made little green apples, you're going to invest in the lifestyle of a medical doctor. Because when you pay that doctor bill, not one penny of that, whether it's out of your own pocket directly, I think I got some change in here, out of your own pocket directly, or indirectly through insurance, or indirectly through being taxed so you can pay Medicare and Medicaid and then have them pay the doctor, not one single penny of that goes to better understand, manage, prevent, cure catastrophic diseases in kids, or breast cancer in women, prostate cancer in men, diabetes, heart disease. It doesn't do any of that. It simply pays the doctor's mortgage. You pay the doctor bill after the second week of the month, you're paying his Mercedes payment. You pay the doctor bill after the third week of the month, you're paying for the tuition for his kids to go to medical school at Harvard up in Boston. Worse yet, he might even be Yale Law School. That's all we need is some more Yale lawyers running around. We got 2 of them in the White House, and you see what's going on there. Now, I believe that the medical profession should, in fact, give people information on a free basis, because they're the only profession, the only trade that we have guaranteed will not fail. You ask your employer to take half the insurance premium out of your paycheck, okay, and you argue, as a union, you try and get them to pay this insurance premium to make sure the doctor gets paid. You don't do that for farmers or cops or butchers or carpenters or plumbers. You only do that for doctors. And you beg your government to tax you to death so that they can pay Medicare for you. You don't do that for cops or farmers or anybody else. You only do that for doctors. So at the very least, I believe the medical profession owes the American public some information.